Testing.
Good evening. It's Wednesday, April 1st. We're going to call the meeting to order at 5:33 p.m. and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Start introductions with Councilor Harriman.
Scott Harriman, City Council Representative to the School Committee.
Donna Gallant, Ward 7.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6. Julia Harper.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Okay. Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Luke Jensen at large.
Phoenix McLaughlin, Ward 1.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
And Member Hawkins is absent this evening. So just one quick note before we get into the budget presentation, we will have time for public comment just on the budget specifically. We have just the blurb in general here, but public comment will be on the budget in particular. But with that, I will turn it over to the superintendent to discuss the budget.
Good evening, everyone. The goal tonight is to share and also have an opportunity to assess information aligned to things that you have mentioned over the last several weeks. The correspondence around what things you want to see, know more about, what have you. As you know, this is a pretty live process. And so as we get information, we try to include it and get it in front of you as soon as we can. We did take an approach to frame questions, requests into categories for review purposes. And I'll walk through what I mean by that. So in budget adjustment items, some of these were shared recently, but also we got in from new information about the insurance rate. And remember, that's a three-stage process. One is a cap. One is the more local cap, which we got last week of 11.5%. And as a reminder, we budgeted 15%, which is a rate that we saw happen elsewhere last year. And so with that realization, we have the nutrition adjustment, which again was a placeholder for funds that we no longer need because of our federal reimbursement process. We have $111,000 in facilities projects we believe we can defer that we talked about last time. We have that JROTC position that was accidentally kept in the budget, but we found when we went through line by line, that's someone that retired. When the replacement came in, it turned from 2 positions to 3. And so that's a correction. And then that insurance savings that we realized last week. April 10th is the date by which we should have, or on the date that we should have, the actual Lewiston specific insurance number. That could result in additional savings. We only went down to the cap, so it could result in no additional savings, but it could result in additional savings. Whatever that difference is, if any, we'll certainly bring that back to you and put in front of you. But when we add up all these items that have changed over the last few weeks or been found through the detailed effort, I call them additional reductions, but we have found essentially through process $733,661 that you can consider what you want to do with. There'll be ideas of further reduction. There'll be ideas of split the difference. There'll be ideas of put things back. And so what we tried to do for tonight's meeting is frame some of those options categorically. So the groupings and breakdown of positions that we talked about, there's more than what we listed here, but we've included well-being, student behavior and improvement, libraries, instructional improvement, literacy, math, and multilingual coaches, grants, including ease and stronger connections, but remind you that is not, those are items that are not in your binder, so adding them is an add. And then any additions as you work through this. I'm pitching these in groupings because I feel like it's helpful to the conversation. But you can really pick and choose in lots of different ways. So I'm not trying to tell you how to pick and choose, just wanted to have a sense about how we go through it. There are other categories on here that I did not feel like the school committee wanted to entertain further or put back, like assistant principals or duty aides. So the things on that initial reduction list, they're still out there, but I didn't include them in this presentation because I didn't get the sense from prior meetings that those were things you wanted to further consider. If you do want to further consider, you have the liberty to do so. So one of the questions that had come up is, what would it cost to keep all of our filled positions? So if we did keep all of our currently filled positions, and I want to remind folks that this is a ever-moving target if someone resigns or transfers, but as of when we put this together, the cost to keep filled positions would be $1.6 million. The cost of the positions that we've shared for potential reduction is $963,264. And I put a reference here for PDF, but the PDF is the document we shared prior that has the reductions listed out on them. So you would have access to what those positions are. Do you want to put that up for a moment or? Sure. So this is in the categories that we had shared. Give me a second, I'll zoom in. Kind of hard to see, but it shows what the position is, the categories that we came up with, the FY27 budget cost. And as a reminder, when you see $80,459, that is a middle of the road projection for what a position would cost that is currently vacant. It could cost more than that. It could cost less than that to fill it. This is the way we've always done that because it's kind of a wash when we get new employees. Sometimes they come in higher or lower depending on the various contracts. It also shows what budget article they're in if you want to go look in the binder for them. And then we've noted whether they're filled or vacant. And we did our best to start filling in whether or not there was a sub or no sub. But again, if you go category and we color coded these, you can see in the well-being, student behavior improvement. And these again are only items that are in your budget. You can see the total vacant cost and the total filled cost.
Clear salary and benefits.
Oh, yes, and this includes salary and benefits, so you know. Yeah. And then you can see the total at the bottom. And we did this for each area, including the proposed additions from some of the reductions. And again, the idea with additions was to try to keep a semblance of having some hands to lift some of the work if we take on these reductions to continue good work moving forward to the best of our ability and continue to seek grants and other funding streams. The next section here, you can see technology. Again, same format. So it's available. I don't know if you want me to go line by line again, but I can always come back to this if you wish.
And just to be clear, this is available in the folder that committee members have, but also is posted online.
Yes. Yeah, this is public. So again, using that category theme, we talked about well-being and behavior management. So again, building off of the what's filled, what's not filled by category. And I tried to capture at least a semblance of what would be included in that. Again, well-being, behavior management, these are items in your budget, not items in grants that are sunsetting, which I have in here as well. But to that end, this goes right off of that chart that we just shared. You can see that there's a vacant position and the rest are filled in that area, and that's the related cost.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. So I would just like maybe just a little bit of clarification, because I was one of the ones that had talked to you about when we talked about kind of what was most important, it was well-being and behavior management was one of those things that I felt that is a huge part, there's a lot of huge things in our district, but I feel like that is one of the big things. And so the reductions that you had given us is 601,000. And I guess I would just like a little bit more clarification from you or from your team in general about your thought process around eliminating social worker positions, eliminating dean, eliminating family engagement roles, and then almost reclassifying the SEL coaches position. So like, because the total reduction wouldn't really be 601,000, right? Because you're talking about reclassifying those SEL coaches positions. So that's not a true total reduction. So I guess I'm just thinking like, I would like to get an idea from you of your thought process around, why some and not others, why those ones are more important than the others, and what that kind of looks like.
Sure. So as we looked at potential reductions, we obviously worked with our administrative team. We got their input on things. And as we worked through the process together, we started looking at what we called the position listing, which is again available online in our budget folder. And when we looked at position listings, we did it by school and we did it categorically. So you can kind of work your way across to say, okay, what does every school have for grade 1? And you can look right across and see a lot of information. What do they have for grade 2? What do schools have for gen ed social workers, because that came up? And also what will schools have because of sunsetting grants and things of that nature. So there was an overall sense that a dean-like or student support position was needed across our elementary schools. And so that was the proposal to add those roles. It isn't intended to look and feel like a swap of positions. I do think they compare in their tasks. But one of the things we learned like this year at Montello was having that dean role, specifically a dean, was very helpful to just help with hotspots throughout the day and be another adult in the halls that can answer the calls so that administrators can be more available to help with other hotspots and or be in classrooms to help grow instruction, which is the goal of an educational leader. And when we looked at these different pieces, we started to figure out, again, draft 1, if you will, of the budget came in at an ask of our local taxpayers of $6.5 million additional dollars over last year. And I didn't feel like that was a number we could bring forward. So we started to figure out, if we have to keep pulling these pieces out, what pieces might we be able to restructure or keep? I think I said this to Chair McLaughlin as we walked over, that when we look at the restructure idea, I don't want people to think we're just swapping positions. We are genuinely trying to look at level of need, level of resource, and finding a sense of balance as it relates from school to school to school using that position listing. So for example, we've heard a lot from people about Montello doing really well this year. I would agree, there's a good pulse there. But I would also say they have, when we go through that position listing, 21 positions that their neighboring school doesn't have. Now, are they being used perfectly? I think that's on us to try to make sure we're using that as well as we can. Some of that is class size components. Some of it is the size of the school. But when we look at school to school comparisons, while I don't think they should be equal, and I know people brought up equality, we have to make some tough decisions around the realities that our schools are no longer as segregated in a sense as they used to be. Because for a while, Connors and Montello, or then Longley and Montello, had a core of our downtown demographic that was a lot of language learners, a lot of low socioeconomic status, and different challenges. That's been more dispersed throughout our community at this point because of people moving around. But to that end, you take like a Geiger or McMahon, they don't have any of those additional resources. They don't have, in places, and I'm gathering it from principals even more today, some schools have social workers that come in from outside. So they're not contracted as much as we provide a space and they provide the service. We have some schools that have none of that, and we have some schools that have 4 or 5 of those people. And so we're trying to look at this matrix and say, how do we make this as equitable as we possibly can, knowing that the needs are different? So when we look at the well-being and behavior management piece, the reason we wanted to add back some positions are the loss of the grant positions that are sunsetting and the demonstrated need that we have, what we've learned from different places in doing things like having the dean at Montello this year. So trying to put resource where we can to support schools as much as possible while maintaining student educational space, learning centered interactions, reducing across the spectrum, really looking hard at all the costs. So I said a lot there. I don't know if you ask a follow-up, but I really think, I don't know if dean is the right term. I almost feel like it isn't, but I also know our community is comfortable with the term dean, or at least has been in the past. But our schools need someone whose primary job is to help with the day-to-day, to help teachers with kids who can't be in the room, instead of clearing rooms like we sometimes do, to help with the hotspots, to get to know the kids, to get to know their families so that they can see that baseline and know what they're bringing in day to day, but also help continue moving forward with our SEL effort and just a smoother day. So that was the idea behind adding positions that I do think are functionally a bit different. But in some places like a Montello, there's 3 positions that we looked at that have some overlap that other schools don't have. So it feels like a bigger hit to them, but they have other resources schools don't have. So I don't want to make any of these cuts. And I'm very passionate about the work that our staff do. None of this was easy, but
Member Bowden?
Thank you. Jake, I really respect you and the job that you have to do, but what you just said just contradicted itself altogether. Most of us sat here last year and listened to teacher after teacher from Montello stand up in front of us and tell us we're drowning. There's so many behaviors going on. We can't get control of the school, and we put things in place to help them. And it just feels like we are ripping those things right out from underneath them. And I don't understand how that is what you came up with to get rid of, because it seems to be working. So I just don't understand. Like, they clearly need a dean at Montello, a dean of students, right? They need the social worker. They need those things at Montello. And I have a really hard time with that's what we came up with. That's what we came up with to get rid of. It doesn't make any sense to me. And what you just said just kind of contradicted everything. So you can continue with your presentation, but.
well, I guess I'd like to chime in on that and say, if someone has other ideas on how to reduce the $6.5 million ask, I'm all ears. But I don't think anybody wants anyone's jobs to be reduced, but we've reduced so many vacant jobs over the last several years that there are no more of these unfilled, what do they do kind of positions that are on our books that are not in place. And I would also, there's other factors that have improved greatly at a space like Montello. They have much less open positions. They're retaining more staff, and that's an effort of their team and their school as a whole. But I thoroughly believe in maintaining these positions. I just don't know where else to draw the reductions.
Counselor Harriman?
Thank you. I just wanted to speak to some of the feedback that we've been getting as a committee. And I realize the feedback I'm getting may be different than others, but I've had very little feedback asking us to cut things and a lot of feedback asking us to keep things. And especially the librarian positions and these behavior management positions. So I just want to make sure everyone considers that in our considerations tonight.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. So, yes, I think we have got a lot of emails and feedback about things that people don't want to see cut, they want to keep. But I'm hoping at some point in this meeting tonight, Jake, maybe you can share Counselor Harriman's email that he sent to all of us so the public can see and everybody here tonight can see kind of some information about what happened last night at City Council and what it's going to look like for reevaluation. So that's one piece. To follow up to what I was talking about for well-being and behavior management, I do agree with what Member Bowden said. Like, we had a school who was here saying that they needed help. Like there was a lot of things going on. And so we put some things into place, I think, that were really good things, whether it was support or people from Dingley were going and helping and evaluating or whatever it was. It's clearly working. And I think part of what my question was to you, and kind of you said that, is not one of our schools, it's not a cookie cutter. It's each individual school is their own individual thing. And so for me, kind of when you said, well, we're going to get rid of the SEL coaches positions, but we're going to create these other 5 positions. In my mind, I'm thinking, well, why are we creating 5 same positions across the board when but do you understand? Like you had come and said, like, there's 5. And so and we had talked in a little bit, and I'm sure you're okay if I share a little bit of what I said to you was, I think, like you had said, that dean type role, and maybe you didn't explain those other positions well enough. And I voiced that to you. I said, I felt like what you had in mind for those types of positions wasn't clearly defined. And I said, these are some of the things I'm looking for, like someone who can help in hotspots, someone who can, if a student's having a hard time, can go to that classroom and pull that student out and try and regroup and re-engage them instead of emptying an entire classroom, because you're forgetting about the other 19 kids in that classroom. And you had said, like, those are some of the things that I'm thinking for these types of positions. And so I don't know if that would help the general public. I don't know if that would help staff, if it was and that's kind of what I was hoping for you to like allude to a little bit more and to explain, like, yes, you're potentially thinking of getting rid of a dean position, but this other position could potentially do this, or this could do this. And I don't think that one position is going to take the place of, the 3 or 4 positions that we're taking that are in this cut for Montello. And I agree. I don't know how the community doesn't have an option. The city is going to hand down your new tax bill and you're going to have no option but to pay it. But they do have a choice whether or not to vote for a budget at referendum. And we know what happened last time at referendum when it went 3 or 4 times, I think. It was a huge blow to our district. Staff were afraid. They went to other districts. And I don't want to see that again to happen to our district. And so where's the balance? I don't know. And I know that's what you're struggling with. But I just am looking for maybe a little bit more like clarity and like openness, kind of like what's rattling around in Jake's brain and like the rest of his team, into what that looks like.
Okay, yeah, if you feel the slides will help address some of that, then is that okay with you, Member Hurd, if the superintendent continues through some of the slides and see if that helps address some of the points? Okay.
Right, so we can answer more questions there. Certainly, we even have a tentative job description around that. We had shared very early in the process, but I think conceptually the idea of 30 reductions dominated people's thinking. So the other area that I feel like was a passion point for the committee and others was the Lewiston Middle School and Lewiston High School librarians. Those are both filled positions. If we did not make any changes, that is a $217,620 component. Again, reminder, that's with benefits. Instructional improvement, there was instructional coaches that were reduced in this budget. The vacant is based on an actual, just so you know, with benefits, and then the filled is another position. And so I don't want to jump too quickly, but I also think to talk about the different scenarios I feel like have been posed. So I want to start there if I can and just walk through these. But in a budget scenario, if the committee felt compelled to include all the proposed reduced positions that are filled, going back to that earlier slide, you would be putting $1.6 million back on the total of this budget. There's also been some inquiry from numerous members about grant funded positions that are sunsetting. And so we did the calculations on that. And if those were added to the budget, those are not in your binder, that'd be additional $503,655. So that is just if we're putting it out there, I said scenario A, but there's definitely two things there if that's what you wanted to decide. In a
Sorry, just a clarifying question. Yeah, Member Reeves.
Clarifying question, includes, budget scenario A includes all proposed reduced positions. So you're not reducing them, you're keeping them?
That are
Is
filled.
that,
just the
that are filled? You're not taking them out, you're keeping them. Is that what this is saying?
I'm saying if the committee decides
Yeah, no, I know,
for
but
just filled, that's what it
it's
would,
the language I'm trying to parse, not, so
all the positions on the budget reduction list that are filled would be
Uh-huh.
that.
would be included and therefore not cut. So,
But it would be in a,
so it's not
so
our
if you-
budget, because our budget includes cutting them.
correct. It would be in
So this would
addition
be-
to your budget.
Yes, that's
but-
what I'm trying to
Yeah,
get
if I
at.
could just say, so the word include there means put back in.
Filled
to-
positions,
Right.
you would be adding $1.6 million to your proposed budget. Yeah.
From what was originally presented as the superintendent's budget that we have in the binder and everything. Okay.
Right. Right, and if you added the sunsetting positions, which are mostly around well-being, I was trying to do this in a sequence, it'd be an additional add in on top of 503,655.
So that's all
Right.
30? You're talking about all 30 now?
No,
No.
so there's been two areas of question, like, that I'm trying to address with this slide. One is, what are the filled positions that have been reduced? That's the first line. And the second one is grant funded positions that are not in this budget that are going away because the grants are going away. If you wanted to include them from a well-being of students perspective, that's our estimate of what it would cost. It's the 503,655. And I took those numbers from the grant funds that are allocated in each of the years of the grant that are sunsetting, just to give you an idea. Again, scenario B, looking at the existing locally funded student support positions. So this is no grants. These are the librarian at the middle school and high school, SEL at Farwell and Geiger, and I list those two schools specifically because those are in the local budget. The other three are not. Those three positions don't exist, which also adds to Member Hurd's question of, well, you're saying you're cutting and putting them back. Well, no, I'm saying we have two. And if we restructured them, we would be adding additional positions. So that's why I put them under additions. The Montello Dean, if you wanted to put that back, the General Ed Social Worker, that's at Montello, and the Family Engagement Coordinator. If you wanted to put those back in the budget, you would be making a $541,571 addition to your existing ask.
Yeah, Member Hurd and then Member Reeves.
Thank you. So the family engagement coordinator position, I was just looking for that page in your very first one that listed the one, like the reductions that you were thinking. The family engagement coordinator, is that at a school?
That's a Montello specific position that does outreach to families and helps to liaison and problem solve accessing school and truancy.
Right. And so if that was gone, that would fall on,
Either the added position that would wear many hats, administration, or whatever you decide.
right.
But it's been proposed as reduced. And if you want to add it back, that grouping, that's what that costs. And again, we can do individual costs if you need to. And that's what that other sheet represents, those individual positions.
So it's just another clarifying question. If you reduce that position, would there be, so this position technically is like reaches out for students that are truant, like those types of things. Is there someone else? Is there someone else at our other schools that does that work? So like McMahon, Geiger, Connor, they don't have a family engagement coordinator, or they do have a family engagement
So
coordinator?
they do not. Connors is the only one, and there's someone that part of their job is to do that kind of effort, not their whole day. But no, that would be the only school that has that particular role. We also have, as from a district perspective, the Student Resource Center, We have an individual down there who runs that. I'm trying not to use names out of respect to the process. And we also have someone who's paid an ed tech level to support that effort, and they get lots of volunteers and they shuffle things to schools and to families and whatnot. But no, that's the only position we have in Lewis Public Schools that does that work, and it's out of Montello.
So who does the work?
Hold on. And one little caveat, Karen's reminding me, we do have someone at the middle school that is some title funds connected to it.
So at Geiger, McMahon, who is responsible for doing the truancy work there?
The administration.
Okay.
It's also shared, right? I'm sure counselors help with this. I mean, teachers will communicate with families who haven't seen your child in a while. I don't want to isolate it too much, but the load is spread amongst others. Or point of service, small stipend.
Great, thank you.
Member Eames?
Again, it's a clarification. So this scenario B is a subset of scenario A.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm
Thank you.
I'm trying to
but
be
it's a
sequential
subset,
about
it's
it.
not-
I moved a lot of slides back and forth, trying to take that subsection of where I started with this category is well-being. If you put
And
it all
this
back
is a
in,
subset of
including
it.
grants, this would be a subset.
Thank you.
Yep.
Member Glenn?
Yeah, I'm in our book, and what I'm trying to figure out is what is, it says for fiscal year 26-27, our local contribution is 35,417,000. And then the overall budget with external subsidy is 130,580,000. So I'm trying to figure out is there a number without any reductions or anything? What's our number that we have for right now without doing a thing, just keeping the way things are?
So on that revenue sheet, if you look at the bottom, the very bottom, to the right, I'm gonna have to turn your book sideways. You see a number of 130 million.
Okay.
And that revenue sheet, that's representative of your whole local in this book budget. It
Okay.
does not include grants. It does not include donations, things of that nature. And that 130 is an increase overall of $12.9 million.
Right.
Well, but when I say local, I'm talking about the local tax base because we received additional subsidy from the state. And so the 3.9 million that I keep referencing is additional local dollars over last year that we would need from the tax base.
So are we trying to reduce this number from 130 million down?
Do you mind if I just say real quick? I think is what you're asking, where currently it says 3.9 million as an increase for the local property tax base. Are you asking what would that number be if there were no position reductions included at all? Because that 3.9 is after taking out those 30 positions,
Okay.
right? So you're asking, what would that number be if all 30 were just back in,
Right.
everything was stable? Is that what
Right.
you're asking?
Yes.
Okay.
Filled or both? Filled and unfilled?
Well, the ones that not the vacant ones, the ones that the fill positions.
So if we did just the filled positions overall, that was 1.6 million. So it would be, I mean, we could do exact math, but it would be additional local of 3.9 plus 1.6. Right? So you'd be looking at $5.5 million ask if you put those positions back in. Those are just the filled.
Okay.
roles.
And so what are we, when we go, I'm just trying to wrap my head about the bottom lines. When we're trying to reduce the 135, right?
Yeah, the 130.5. Yeah.
Is what we're trying to reduce.
Well, that's the committee's decision at this point. Do you want to reduce? Do you want to use
Or
savings?
we're gonna go ask for 135 million from the taxpayers.
So you don't ask 130.5 from the taxpayers. The only ask that you would be making right now, if nothing changed from what I proposed to start March, the ask locally would be 35,417. So it's up a couple lines,
Okay, gotcha.
and that's just the total local. grand total local.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. So we can look at these scenarios all day long, but until we have an actual number from the city for a rate that's going to tell us for every 1,000, this is what you are paying, literally, we can't do anything. Like that is what this meeting usually is and has been in subsequent years, is you sit here and you say, if we add scenario A in, it's going to bring the mill rate to this and it's going to bring it up this much and this is what it's going to cost. We can't do any of that until the city comes back and actually has something concrete to show us.
So the mill rate is known, at least projected to be $19.68 per thousand. The penny that we used to always talk about, we believe is 39,500. So that is a piece of your calculation. The factor that people don't have yet is, what's my home going to be valued at? And so we're missing a key piece of the metric, which
Counselor Harriman, do you want to say something? And I'll add something to that too.
Sure. Yeah. So I just emailed the committee earlier today. The city council had a workshop last night and the city finance director shared some preliminary numbers. They're examples. They're not specific properties. And Superintendent Langlis, if you want to pull that up, you can. So she just shared some scenarios of what taxes would look like with the revaluation and with the new tax rate. There were 3 different ones based on homes that are currently valued at 100,000, 150,000, and 250,000. And I guess I'll just go through the middle one. So if you're, and this is specifically for single family homes, owner occupied. So if your current valuation is $150,000, you're currently getting a homestead exemption of $11,750, and that's reduced because our valuation is not up to 100%. So that means you have a net taxable valuation of 138,000 approximately. Current tax rate is 3278, so your current tax bill is $4,531. The estimate for the new valuation, and again, this is sort of an estimate across the city. Individual properties will have different valuations. The estimate is $348,800. You would get the full homestead exemption because the valuation is up to 100% now. So that gives you a net taxable valuation of $323,800. The new tax rate, we did find a few little pieces of savings, so that's down to $1,962 now proposed. So that brings the tax bill to about $6,353. It's about a 40% increase. So that's just sort of a overall, big picture kind of thing. Everyone's individual properties are going to vary a little bit, but that's probably fairly accurate for residential properties.
Just the piece I was going to add, so those examples are interesting, but it's not, they're examples and they're estimated new valuations. What we don't have, which we typically have at this point in the process, is what is the median for the whole city for homes or rental units, which I just make that distinct. I mean, it is good to know. I think it's probably fair to say at this point, we know that residential values are going to be disproportionately higher than commercial values through the revaluation. I don't think that's a surprise, and quite a lot so. But we don't know exactly what we're looking at in terms of, the median homeowner. Are there more homes that are like ending up in this example 3 camp, more in the example 1, that type of thing. So I just want to make that point. We could talk more about this. We have talked about it at a couple past meetings, but I think it would be great if we finish the presentation. But
Yes.
Member Bowden did have a hand up.
Yeah, I just can't be quiet. So it's been extremely frustrating watching this play out for 2 years when everyone knew this was coming, and the city council, the mayor, everybody could have done something to try to mitigate this blow to us. But instead, here we are playing guessing games and watching our taxes, go up like this. So either way, I've said it before, I'll say it again, we're going to take the blow for this because we're the ones that hit the referendum, not them.
Would you mind carrying on with the examples? And then we have a lot to discuss. There's no doubt about that. And we'll get to it. And I'm just hoping we can at least get through the superintendent's examples here.
So sliding to scenario C, this would include the Montello Dean and the 2 locally funded SEL coaches. I think it was Member Bowden that was asking, what would that cost just as a scenario? So that total cost, again, with benefits was 283,862. Under the proposed budget, so this is my caveat to this, is consider that the proposed budget has a position for each elementary school that's going to be noted in scenario D. So yes, there's movement here. This is a different job description. But I want to be upfront with you, obviously, for transparency purposes. If you decide I want to put those back, well, then we don't need these other additions unless you consciously choose to do so. And so there's a parallel between these, and that's why I put them together on the sheet. So when you can see the reductions and potential additions together, because let's say if we put the dean back at Montello, you could choose to also keep that student support person that I've proposed as an addition, but I want everyone to be aware that the dean has been pulled out and the student position, service position is in there. So I'll check that as we go, but I just don't want you to think we're adding this back. It's good, but we've also added an additional position you didn't intend to add. So just know that both of those things are in play. So I just wanted to put on these bullets and share it to the world that depending on the direction of the committee, we'd want to make sure that we capture the changes in both the proposed reductions and in the additions so that your intentions are known in what you approve. In budget scenario D, it would include the librarians, the student support person at each elementary school. This is that dean-like role. If you wanted to keep the Montello dean, social worker, and add clinical support to Geiger and Connors, so this is more aligned to some semblance of balance, that would land as a cost of $303 additional due to other positions already in the budget. But in doing this slide, I pulled the additions out. I just wanted to be clear with you up front about that. Budget scenario E is, as I think Member Gallant was trying to get at with the different math of things, if you made no changes to proposed budget, we do have $733,661 we have found through this process in insurance rate, in a line error, and other things that we believe we can defer or not have to have. You could capture that and say, take that 3.9 additional $1 million ask and drive it down. That is an option for the committee. Other considerations which I've mentioned, we could see additional reduction in our insurance. We may not. The one-time bridge funding at the state level, I haven't heard an update today, but I think we'll hear an update soon. I don't know if that has the traction to get passed at the appropriation level, but if it does, it could add to our subsidy in the immediacy, and that could be used again in your approved budget. I don't know if there's an update from the state yet on that. I think that's still very much being worked on. Other considerations that came up, could we move the referendum? So we have either more information and or larger turnout. It is in charter that the council has to approve something by May 31st. And the reason for that is by charter, the school committee, the school would have an opportunity for an approved budget 1 month before the end of the fiscal year. And just to overcomplicate matters, our fiscal year ends June 30th. And so what happens if we don't have an approved budget per state statute, we continue with the existing budget. The problem with that is if we continue with the existing budget without really curbing what we do, and we end up with a budget smaller after multiple votes or another vote, we land in a place that we start the year in the red. So from a school perspective, we would immediately look to freeze, not purchase, and do whatever we have to do to make sure we're staying underneath a projected number of what we think the community can support locally.
Member Glant.
I think as Member Bowden and others have said, is that we're going to be asked to cut and cut and cut. So if we go in with what you recommended, the changes that you made, at least I think that's the deepest cut, is it not? That if we do that, then if that's not approved, then we have to come back and cut more. I mean, if we start really high, we know we're going to come back. I don't know. It's a hard decision.
Oh, Counselor Harriman, yes.
Yes, just along those lines, I think we need some room, what we approve before it goes to the referendum, I think needs to have some room left in it in case it does get rejected to continue to do more cuts there. So I think we just need to find some kind of balance in between the full original budget before you made some reductions and then the reductions that you did make. I think we just need to find some middle ground there so that there is some room to move in case it does get rejected, which based on the feedback we've received so far, I don't know that it would, but it's also a relatively small sample size compared to the entire city.
Yeah, go.
So just to finish up, this is my last slide, but I have a feeling we might go back to others or need to answer other questions, but we're definitely looking for your direction for next steps. In the agenda, we did put a potential vote on the school committee budget. You're not obligated to do that tonight. We do have a meeting Monday. The city presentation is Tuesday. I've already shared my presentation materials with them. I'm sure I can adapt to whatever's decided between today and Monday. Or at least recommendations to share the direction, but you're not obligated to vote on this budget tonight. Typically, we have a little more process and a little more time. I would say end of April, that April 27th meeting is a pretty absolute date unless something drastic changes and you call additional meetings. So for those watching, the next steps for us at least are the work you continue to do, whether you vote tonight or another night. The city presentation is next Tuesday. The committee does meet on Monday. At some point, the school committee will have to adopt a proposed budget that we present to the city council on May 5th. And 1 week later is the referendum. And Member Harper actually asked a good question today. Between the 5th and the 12th, we usually do a town hall to explain what's in the approved budget, answer any questions people have. And we're happy to do more of that if communities is requesting it, including going to sites to answer questions like we did last year. So that offer's out there.
I might suggest that we just start the discussion continuing with, questions and clarifying questions and discussion around the substance of the different position changes and such that we started to get into. And then we can kind of move into the larger budget and ultimately, which package that we might be leaning towards in that conversation. That would be my suggestion. Remember her, did you have an additional?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. I just had a question. Is there a reason that the SEL positions for Farwell and Geiger are not grant, or the other three positions, they're grant or Title I funds? Is that how I understand that or no?
Yeah, so.
Okay, so is there a reason why those other two, not, is it based on like need? Like, how is that determined?
It's based on, to be honest, strategic thinking in that we wanted to get to a place that we had someone at every school and the budgets just couldn't do it. So when we got to a place where we had some grants that we kept looking for that we finally got, we were able to say, okay, with these grants, aside from the ease grant being shortened, we were able to have someone at every single school doing this work if it wasn't vacant for multiple years to try to get this effort off the ground. Between the shortening of the grants and what we could get in locally, that's just where it landed. So there's the rhyme or reason as to where the positions are was really around cobbling together funds to have someone at every elementary school.
So the other three positions, their grants are not sunsetting or they are sunsetting?
The funds for the other three positions are sunsetting
Okay,
or not available because of Title I escalation.
okay.
I might ask, related to what Member Hurd was asking earlier, I would say two related questions. So could you maybe describe what the difference would be between the existing dean of students at Montello and the suggested student support specialist at Montello? And maybe somewhat related question would be, one of the positions to potentially be reduced is a vacant SEL coach at Geiger. So again, what might the distinction be from that to the student support specialist? If you don't mind, a kind of related question though is, because that is vacant, is there an opportunity to just reclassify, redo that position into the new form, kind of regardless? And that would just be a budget neutral thing, but if that needs to happen during this process. So a couple questions there.
I'll do my best to answer them. So the vacant position at Geiger is just because it's posted but unhired. So they, I mean, Principal Gish would tell you, I think if she came up, that's a position that she sorely needs, and would like to have. She'd also like to fill it, but she's also trying to keep teachers in classrooms and find that balance. So there's that component. As it relates to the reduction of the dean, the dean role was a decision that was made to support some bigger hotspots. It wasn't actually in your budget last year. That is something that we did, sorry, year before, something we added last year in part of that effort of helping with some hotspots in Montello. So try to navigate your question. When we look at additions and the number on additions, we have that generic number. Remind me what that other part of your question was. I'm sorry.
It's just what would the difference be in the day-to-day or the job description even of that dean of students position to the student support specialist position?
Yeah, so I can throw up some notes. This isn't formalized, adopted, or anything to that effect. But when we talk about potential key responsibilities, let me see if I can share. So let me just zoom this in. We didn't formalize this, but to understand the thinking, what we said was, all right, we've got deans, we've got SEL support positions, we've got our effort around ruler and kids making better decisions. We've got folks who are available in the buildings that also help with hotspots differently, interventionists, what have you. And some schools have them, some schools don't. Some schools have them and they're vacant. Some schools don't have them at all. And some schools have multiple. And so we looked at this carve out of, if we reduce SEL folks and if we reduce dean staff, but we're also hearing every school needs support with these hotspots, what would that job be? So this is where we get into like that restructure conversation. So we talk about this has not been vetted. This has not gone through the HR department, my office, you. This is just notes on a screen, but it talks about meshing everything from therapeutic crisis intervention, calling that truant family, seeing if you can help them get access to food through the student services center, but also helping on the floor with hotspots and helping a teacher when you get a call on the radio. And so again, it's up there, but it's not perfect. It's not clean, but it is different fundamentally from what an SEL coach does. An SEL coach takes an instructional approach, goes into classrooms to help with routines, behavioral interventions, strategies that might help someone navigate the day more effectively, kid-wise, and teaching kids certain skills, but also go into classroom and teaching teachers skills to grow that routine or that craft so they can exercise it in the classroom. Also to grow our efforts around bringing ruler into our elementary schools as a systemic approach to positive behavior interventions, to helping our kids understand what it is that they're feeling right now. What are some strategies to regulate in the moment, because that's where we're having problems, and how do we successfully get them back to class without just sending kids home all the time, while still sometimes necessary. So when we talked about like the Montello positions, that's what really started to help me framing this. Montello Dean's done a good job. The family coordinator role has done a good job. I mean, we know the importance of clinical interventions. So when we looked at that kind of body of work, we also started looking at how some schools were using the SEL position, and it was more dean-like than it was SEL position-like. And so that's how I got to this place of, all right, we need a job description. If we're going to remove all these people from schools, what are we hearing from administration? What do we know we're seeing from kids? What supports could we provide teachers without just ripping all of this Band-Aid off? And that was the idea, to create, again, this rough job description for student support specialists that would wear lots of hats. It's not the same capacity, but that was the difference. And so if you're going to add that position that carries those buckets, you could pull the dean position out and have this position try to carry as much as they can of the buckets that the dean was carrying, and the other positions we reduced.
Thank you. That is helpful. Okay, Member Hurd and then Member Glant.
So for this student support position, people will obviously have to apply. Are there different certification, education requirements for this student support position than what the current SEL coaches have to have? Because then as a district, you're looking at the cost for training. I mean, I'm just thinking like, if we want to create those, that's great, but also to what?
So D, all the above. So all of this would land underneath our certified professional educator contract. They work the teacher year. So do our school counselors and other positions that are not in the classroom teaching. They all into that contract. This position, if adopted, would land under that contract, would work the school year and the additional days the teachers work. I think what we would post is we would need to be a certified teacher for the state of Maine. What their field of specialty is, I think, could vary as far as certification goes. I think folks that have familiarity and success in these existing components would be favorable, is probably how we'd list it. And then if we have to train people, we would look to do as much of that in-house as we can, because we do have a pretty good core of folks in-house that know these different roles. The biggest challenge to all this is, again, try not to lose all of it in this budget process, maintaining what I think buildings are saying they need, and staff saying what they need and what we're seeing from kids. But the reason I say this is not vetted and filtered as much as it should be is I don't know any one human that can do all of that. But I know that we have lots of good people that could help do as much of that as they could every day.
Member Glant and then Member Bowden.
Back to the sheet here, the revenue sheet. It looks like we have 7.1 million in our fund balance, general fund balance before 2027. Prior years, back in 2000, we've taken out 5 million, and we're only taking out 3.5 million. Is there a possibility we could go back up to 5 million and have 2 million left in our general fund?
You could, but the multi-year challenge to that is you automatically don't have it next year. And so we would be sitting at this table in 12 months saying, we don't even have 3.5 to contribute to this cost to educate our kids. And so anything we subtract from that 7.1, I was trying to be in the middle ground of saying, okay, if we can use half of it, and then maybe even next year, try to use even less, because no matter what, when that fund balance is gone, it is instantly money we have to find and make up to balance our budget.
I just, in prior years, we've taken out 5, and I just think maybe this year we could do the same. I know it's going to go down, obviously.
And in prior years, especially right after COVID, we were intentionally trying to save funds locally in our budget process. So that fund balance was bigger, and we've been drawing it down, and it's definitely getting small.
Okay. And what is the two variables that we don't know is the amount of money coming back from the state? There was something about that, and then our insurance. What do you think of the possibilities of that coming in, and how much do you think it could be?
I'm not going to dare guess at the insurance number, but I think you need that number before you make a decision. I really do. You could take a tentative vote, so at least we have some more clear direction as where the school committee is headed, and we can continue to dig. But I'd love some direction, whether it's straw poll or what have you, but if that number comes back lower, it's a saving. So when we went from 15 to 11.5%, it was $450,000. So it's over $100,000 per percentage point in our total makeup. So if it comes back anything lower than 11 and a half, it's 100,000 plus per percentage point. Again, we won't have that number until then, and it could not reduce. We've also had years where, I don't know if past members remember, we held strong at 12% because districts around us were getting 15 and 14, and we came in at like 3 or 4. And so it's happened. That's why I don't want to make a guess and create a false narrative of the roller coaster of emotions of what we're going to do next. As it relates to the second part of what you asked, the state bridge 1-year funding, the legislature's approaching an approval for a shift in the funding formula, which is going to give us more money, but it won't take effect for another full fiscal year. This bridge effort is to provide some of that funding for next school year and not making us wait a full year to get it.
Member Bowden.
All right, I've got a few things. First of all, where are we at as a district as far as all of our teachers having a teacher certification at this point?
I think last time we checked with HR, we were down to 5 teachers that were uncertified in their current field, all of whom are progressing toward it.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just gonna say this straight up. I didn't like it on day one. I still don't like the cuts that you've given us. I don't like it. They work directly with our kids. I just don't see how we as a district cut all of these professionals who work directly with our kids. And this is a very unpopular opinion, and I'm sorry to all the educational coaches in our district. When we can cut the educational coaches out of our general fund and keep these people who are working directly with our kids. I'm stuck on that. I'm stuck on how much administration we have. There's a lot of people that are needed to make this district run. I get it. But I just feel like this isn't it. These options aren't it. I can't vote on this tonight. I can't do it. And I'm also one of these people who has, a home in Lewiston that, I'm already paying $7,000 a year in taxes, and I know that's going to jump $3,000 or $4,000. So I cannot keep all these positions and ask all of this of taxpayers, because I am one too, and also see our kids suffer from it. This whole thing is such a mess. I'm not prepared to vote on this tonight, and I want to scrap every single thing that you've brought before us to cut. I just don't see how we cut these. So I don't know what the answer is. I'm sorry, but I can't do this.
Member Harper.
Thank you. I also have a lot of things. And one thing I will just echo is that I don't at all feel prepared to vote on this tonight. So I just want to say, as a general statement, I know that no one up here wants to cut, including obviously the superintendent. All of these positions, if we had all the funds, all the schools would have all the positions. But unfortunately, that's not the reality. So I really want us as much as possible to look at data to make our decisions, which includes, what is the reality on the ground at each of these schools and how much support do they need, and trying to make an equitable decisions with staffing. And I also want us to think about the long-term impacts of some of these cuts. If we talk about trying to save here and there with different positions, that could increase staff burnout, staff turnover, and end up with even in a worse position next year when we're looking at these costs. I also, I want to thank the public so much for all of the feedback we've gotten. It's really helpful. And it's also really helpful when staff share, again, like just data about what's going on in the role, what your caseload is, all that stuff is really helpful. I'm not entirely convinced, or like, I'm new, I understand that. So there's a lot I need to know about these positions. But for example, at Montello, one of the positions that is listed as vacant, no sub, is the SE resource room teacher. And what we received in a couple emails was that this is actually filled by a long-term sub. And it's the K through 2 special ed case. They have a K through 2 special ed caseload, and that the other staff that would have to absorb those very high need caseload kids it would just be extremely difficult. They're already spending a lot of time outside of their contracted hours. So I'm, really concerned about that. And we heard that about Montello, but I'm just curious about what the deal is with other, there's, I think, a resource room cut at the high school, the middle school, and there's some other here that I don't have highlighted. I'm sorry, it's a lot. I've been like trying to like piece together all these different filled and unfilled and different data that we've received. So anyway, so that's a big question that I have, is like, is this accurate? What is understanding that position. I also have similar questions about sort of the mental health resources in our schools. I asked for some information regarding just what are all the different clinical mental health supports. And you sent a spreadsheet, but I think it would be really helpful to sit down maybe with Karen to just understand, like, what are the supports. I also heard that, for example, there's a lot of resources drying up all over the place for mental health, but that the high school used to have like I forget what it was called, but basically a center where there was multiple supports, mental health related supports that were contracted by CSS, I think, that then dissolved recently, so that the gen ed social worker at the high school that is slated, is on a sunsetting grant that is not even included in the proposed cuts because it's just evaporating, is, one of the only mental health supports. But I don't feel like I truly grasp exactly like what the supports are for students at each school. And again, I say this all the time, but I really believe that in particular in Lewiston, where we are a community that has suffered a mass shooting and that has gun violence in the community, in which, we know youth are involved in, I really don't think that people want to see mental health supports evaporating from our schools. It just feels very dangerous thing to do for me. So that's a piece of it. And again, just to say for the public, this is, I can hear some people saying, well, our job is to educate. It's not necessarily to, provide all these other supports, but, kids need also sometimes that support in order to get to the place where they can actually learn. And in a community, again, I feel strongly that is something that I think Lewiston voters do appreciate in our schools and want to see a baseline of safety. Okay. I also
Just remember, Harper, before you continue, maybe just on one of your earlier points, I might ask if the superintendent could address just the resource room teacher.
Yeah, I'd love to. I know Director Crafts is here also, as it relates to which the positions were that were vacant. And we did look at who's filling that position, who's not. I did also see the email that talked about caseloads. I saw another one about a K1 position elsewhere, and they let them speak to them. We spent a lot of time making sure that we didn't do certain things, and that's included. So I do think we have to be mindful that we filter the information that comes in, at least to verify it. The CCS role, that was a grant-funded position. It put clinicians in the middle and high school, and that CCS did have, I don't know if it was a change in decision-making, management, and or funding. I think it was all of the above. But they did make a decision to pull those resources out of our schools last spring, I believe it was, if I remember correctly. So there was definitely an impact to students who access those clinicians.
Okay, so I can talk to the caseload numbers for Montello. So we ran a spreadsheet of every building caseload numbers, and they have their resource level numbers are lower than most schools right now, actually. Those caseload numbers paperwork wise have already been divided up by the other 4 resource room teachers that are at Montello. So by cutting this position, it's not going to add more numbers to their caseloads paperwork wise. That's already been done and it's divided up. Tiffany's up here. She's going to talk about there's currently an ed tech providing the instruction within the classroom that's being paid as a long-term sub, but her and I can, if there's concerns about that person not being compensated anymore, we can look at other ways to do that under the supervision of a 282 if there's enough need for that in terms of number wise that the students that need the direct instruction in the classroom. So there's 2 separate issues. There's the paperwork, doing the IEPs, having 282 certification. That's already been done. It's been divided out, but then there's also the instruction part. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Sure. We do have a current resource from Ed Tech who has taken over that long-term assignment. So just a point of clarification that those students are being serviced by that Ed Tech. She's being paid as a long-term sub in that role. And then, like Kristen said, the paperwork is divided among the case managers, but we do have somebody who is actively helping service those students. So I think that was I think there was a question around that vacancy and if we have a sub in that. So there is somebody who is doing the service and she does great work there. So that was something that we were just talking about as you were questioning that.
So for certification purposes too, you have to have the 282 to do the paperwork itself for the IEPs, but to provide instruction, you have to be an Ed Tech 3 or above under the supervision of a teacher that holds a 282. So that's how they can provide direct instruction. So it's 2 separate issues, if that makes sense. Is there any questions on that?
Thank you for that clarification.
We're really trying to be equitable too amongst all of the schools, making sure that caseload numbers are more accurate, that, the teachers at one elementary school don't have more than the teachers at the other. So we looked at that when deciding what positions to cut.
Thank you. Member Harper, you had other items you wanted to add?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I also just want to say that I think we received two emails from staff expressing serious concern about the cut there. And I recognize that you wouldn't cut it if you didn't feel like you had to. But I just wanted to say that. Yeah.
I just want to clarify about the indication on the document that it was not a long-term sub and we're saying we have a long-term sub. Because the person who's doing that work is already employed as an ed tech and is getting paid as a long-term sub, in our human resources department, there isn't an additional long-term sub that's hired. So I just want to clarify that the information is accurate as it relates to HR, but there is someone being paid as a long-term sub that's currently an employee, but is getting additional pay to do that work. Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean, for the ed tech, does that mean that there's an ed tech position that's so basically you have an ed tech that's getting additional pay to do it. And if you cut this role, then that person goes back to being an ed tech.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So, also, we've heard a lot of different things about instructional coaches, and what I'm hearing is that there's different utilization at different schools. And I understand that there are a number of them that are funded by title, or at least the building has made a decision about title funds. And I still, it's unclear to me exactly, what leeway we have to make changes to that if it's title. I'm wondering about more information specifically from staff, potentially like a confidential survey that is given to teachers that, has them give feedback on how often they use instructional coaches and, what they perceive their impact to be, only because, I think that there may be, if we're talking about making strategic decisions, there may be some schools that aren't utilizing them as much, don't need them as much because they have other staff supports. So that's a question that I have. And I think, yeah, I don't know if you want to respond to that. I have just two other things regarding sort of the bigger budget.
We can certainly bring back to you specific numbers as it relates to what's in title, what's not, but a reminder that title funds have rules around what's allowable, what is not. And also they have rules around you can't supplant. So you can't move a position from a local budget into title because you want to. That's considered supplanting. And so between following the rules, which the title funds do strongly support instructional coaches, when we talk about like long-term effects, I mean, a good coach is obviously better than someone who's still growing, but the primary goal of what we do, when we talk big philosophy, is deliver the best instruction that we can. And that's what the instructional coaches are designed to help too. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I would say that we can get you a number as to how much of that is local as well. It might be suggested. It may not be the savings locally that you think, and we can't just grab money and move it to title. It's considered supplanting and it's not allowable.
So I can also provide you with data at a later time around the number. Coaches keep track, just like teachers keep track of, who they work with and who's doing certain things. Coaches keep track of that in a spreadsheet format that allows us to not necessarily see the information about the specifics around what teachers and coaches are working on, but we get to see the duration of what we call cycles. So if a teacher engages in a coaching cycle, there are different lengths of those cycles, depending on the need of the support that the teacher needs, but really based on the needs of the students. So it's helping the teacher support the students, but the outcome should improve student achievement, right? So we do track that. And that's certainly a piece of their work that we have access to and can certainly share that. I think the other important piece to remember about instructional coaches is that the pieces of their job that you don't necessarily see as it relates to collecting data, which is providing professional development to departments or to entire groups of staff, to supporting principals as it relates to helping them understand the scope and sequence of curriculum and providing them with a level of knowledge around that. And some of our specialists in our district office help with that as well, and support the coaches in that, as well as learning that curriculum and learning those particular areas of focus. And I believe at one of the meetings that I wasn't present at, there was some conversation around the need for a level of focus for different instructional coaches. So we can certainly get you that information, and we have in the past sent out surveys, and there actually is a component of the coaching work. If a teacher and a coach complete an entire cycle, that they provide both feedback to their learning as well as there's some data collected on the students' learning as well, and that's all captured. So that is something that we do look at, and that helps us provide feedback to our coaches as well as our administrators, and looking at how can we use those folks better. So that is absolutely something we have and we can get you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Were you going to say something?
Just there's some other hands, but did you have
Yeah, I do.
something else?
Can I
Okay.
keep going?
Yeah, if you can, just get through it.
Okay.
Thank you.
That would be very helpful. And I also think potentially, I don't know, if another survey is possible, just to, like, with the lens of, just being very honest in the sense that we may need to make some cuts across the district, and thinking about, like, what cuts are being proposed at their school, and, what would the trade-off would be in terms of, because I have heard absolutely that we've gotten a number of emails in defense of coaching that being very helpful, particularly for newer teachers. And, I definitely don't want to take these positions away. I'm just also thinking again about student facing, and in those hard decisions that we have to make. So that's piece. And then, I also think that there doesn't seem to be enough proportional cuts to administration, which is also what Janet's member Bowden said, that I just think that we also need to be looking there harder in administration for non-student facing potential cuts. And we can't do that. That's only something that the superintendent can look at. And then I don't know what areas that the superintendent may or may not have looked at in relation to, Member Jensen had suggested looking at the one-to-one tech at the elementary level, because I imagine that we already have all the one-to-one tech resources. So I don't know if there's any savings that can be cut there, but it definitely seems like analog is really important, particularly for young kids. Yeah.
All right, just for clarification, when you talk about one-to-one tech, I want to make sure I'm talking about one-to-one technology. Okay, I didn't know if you're talking about
Sure.
one-to-one and like ed tech.
Oh,
Sorry, my brain went to a different place. We did inquire about that, and the real answer in year one, that would be almost no savings. It would be the accumulation of the software license for the management system, and it was, Mark, I'm going to try to throw this right out of my head. It was like $7,000 savings in year one, and then the only savings that you would realize in year 2 and 3 would be devices you don't purchase and further software you don't buy. It creates another snag with assessments, but that's a whole different piece. There's resources for that. Did I capture that? Well, okay. But we did ask our IT team to look at that specifically, what that would cost.
okay. And my other comments are just around the revaluation stuff, but maybe we can talk about that.
Sure, yeah.
At the
And
end.
I don't mean to rush anybody. I'm
Okay.
sorry about that, but we can continue down the line. Member Hurd.
Thank you. So, I agree with Member Bowden. I don't like any of these scenarios at all. I don't feel comfortable voting on any of them. For me, I feel like, and I didn't witness all of I wasn't here for all of the school presentations. And I apologize, but the ones that I did see, everything that the admin was saying was a thing that they needed or a hurdle was behavior. And you're cutting most of the physicians that we're thinking about cutting are behavior. And so that's hard for me. Because I feel, and some may agree and some may disagree, but if we can get classroom behavior under control in our classrooms, the learning will happen. The learning is happening. And, my kiddos were in the district for quite a few years, and I was in school, and the amount of disruption, like, it's constant. Teachers can't teach. There's something popping up every few minutes because there's a behavior. And so it's no wonder that our students, they're not learning because they aren't in an environment where they can learn. And so to take away SEL, dean, social worker positions, you're only going to that's going to just continue to deteriorate. And so I want to see scenarios in front of me that show supports for those things and other things gone, because I truly feel that if you take away these, if not you in general, but if we as a district cut these positions, if our goals, and we had said, like, we don't want to put a number, we don't want to put a graduation rate, we don't want to do that. But if our goal, one of our goals is to increase learning rate, graduation rates, those types of things, you're going to hinder that by taking these away. Or as a district, we will be hindered. I'm trying not to put this on you personally. And so that is what I want to see. And that's what I think that's what I keep hearing. And that's what I've seen. And not just from staff who have emailed. And I know there's a small population that has emailed us. Not everybody out there has emailed us. But in being in this seat for the last 5 years, that's what's important. That's what's going to get our students where they need to be. And like Member Roden said, now we only have 5 teachers who don't have their certification. I mean, our staff are going to school to learn how to teach. That's what they're being taught to do. And so they have those tools. They're being taught how to do that. And if we can support them behaviorally, so how to help with those behaviors in the classroom, manage all of that, they can do what they were taught to do, which is to teach our students. And so that is what I want to see for scenarios. That's what I would like for you and the team to bring back to us, is what it looks like with that in mind.
Member Glant, did you have a hand up still? No, Counselor Harriman.
Thank you. Yeah, my comment was more about sort of the general direction, because I don't think we can really take a vote tonight. We still don't know that insurance number. And potentially, we've gone from the 15% that we budgeted as sort of a high possibility. We're down to 11.5%, which is what we've been given as the cap. If that goes down to, let's say, 1.5%, which may be unlikely, but that's about $1 million there that could go a long ways towards covering some of these positions that are proposed to be cut. I just think I think we've had really good discussions tonight and have maybe given you some direction, and please let us know if you need more. But I think that we have to at least wait till we get that number before we make more final decisions. And then maybe we could schedule another workshop or meeting after that to come up with a more final number to send to City Council. But that's my thoughts for now.
Member Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you to all the members of the public, our staff that have emailed me. I've issue with my joints and haven't really been able to type well on this thing or on my phone. So that's why I haven't responded to pretty much most of them, if I'm being honest. But if you guys leave a callback number, I'll be happy to give anyone a phone call. So just wanted to say that first. I guess jumping right into it, the process itself, this has been very chaotic. This is the 4th school budget I've done as a member of the school committee, a couple in the city council. And it's just very different. It's been very chaotic for me, and I've been kind of having a hard time kind of following along, like what direction we're going in. I really wish we had done our goals and priorities early on in the term in January, because it would have provided us more of a direction of how we want to approach this budget. I think we absolutely failed in that regard, and I don't want to beat a dead horse in that, but it really would have helped us out. I forgot, one of you guys were alluding to something about maybe making cultural changes in our schools, working on the behaviors things. There are a lot of things we can do that don't have any price tag to them, things that would improve the learning in our classrooms. And if we had been able to work on our priorities and goals earlier, I think it would have helped this process. That's all I'm going to say on that. But I guess moving on, I'm definitely not ready to vote on this tonight. There's much more work that we need to do. I think of, like, I brought up the idea once of having a parking lot. Usually in like past budgets, we'd have a parking lot, certain ideas would stand out, and we'd say, okay, this is important to me. Let's put this on the list, come back later. Sometimes we go through and say, is this something we want to keep or take out? And it's more organized that way. This, I feel like, I apologize to you, Jake. I feel like the lights are off and we're just throwing random things at you. And I don't know how you know how to move forward with this, because I honestly don't really get a vibe from the committee of how we're doing this. And I feel like you have been unfairly attacked, and I apologize for that. This budget is entirely our purview. We task you with giving us options, and we can ignore those options if we want. And even if we want to make cuts to options that you're not putting in front of us, we can do that. So I just want to make clear to the public that this is not his responsibility. This is on us. We ran for office. We took an oath to do this. This is on us. Whenever we pass morally, we will have to live with this. So I just want to make that very clear too. I wanted to speak about the vacant special education positions. Yeah, I've worked in education the last 10 school years, most of them. I worked for 1 year as a resource room, a special education teacher. And the reason we can't hire those positions is because it should not be on a CPE salary. It should be an administrator salary. The work is insane. I mean, I had a caseload of only about 15 students, and it's all the work of being a teacher with a ton of extra meetings you have to prepare for, and then a whole lot of paperwork you have to do that has to be done right, or you have angry parents and potential legal trouble. And so the reason we're not hiring those positions is because, it's, you don't pay enough for it. It's a lot of work. And I was at McMahon teaching gen ed last year. The two other teachers that would often show up on the Sundays and kind of joke around, hey, Sundays, were two special education teachers, one resource and one self-contained. And so they work usually 6 days a week. It's a tough job, and I think it requires a bigger conversation outside of the budget of how we can fill those positions. But I don't think the strategy is even cutting those positions, because that just adds a whole lot of caseload work to other staff members that aren't really getting any extra pay for it. I don't think it's good for their mental health, and I don't quite frankly think it's fair to them. So again, I mean, it's just tough situations we're in, but I just want to make that clear. We haven't really talked about that too much. I know it was brought up tonight, and I really appreciate that. But I just think we have to kind of understand why those positions are not getting filled. And it's because we're paying way lower for the ridiculous amount of work that they have to do. And so I'll be honest, I'm not really in favor of cutting those positions, the special education vacant positions, because at least now there's hope that they could be filled and that the caseloads could get off the backs of the other teachers doing that load. But if we take them away, then there's no hope for them. And then teachers are just going to go, guess another year of, working 6 days a week, high stress loads, which does affect their both physical and mental health. And so, I just, it needs to be said. Moving on, I mean, I guess in regards to that, like I've been in contact with some staff, and a lot of staff members in the district have been recording like the amount of time that they spend past their contract hours. And a lot of them are on track to hit 9 weeks of unpaid, essentially overtime by the end of this school year. So they say teachers don't work the summer. It's because they work during the school year, work themselves to the bone. All right, let's see, moving on here. I guess as far as providing directions, I would like to see more central office cuts, or have us more of a conversation about that. Look into positions we could cut there. I really don't think we should be cutting at the school, like the student facing level. I just think we're pretty bare bones as is, and there's no fat to cut. Not that there is a dingley, but I just feel like if we have to make priorities, it should be making sure that our schools are safe for our students and staff members. And that would be my preference, although I'm not going to say any positions that we do cut aren't unnecessary, because if anything, we're understaffed as a district. We're very understaffed right now. So thinking about these cuts, we're understaffed and we're going to be cutting more. And that's devastating. This is a crisis that we're in. Let's see, number 6. Yeah, the one-to-one tech in elementary school. I mean, if we had, done the priorities a little bit earlier, I would have made it clear that I don't want any one-to-one technology at the elementary level. It's not good for the kids. There's a reason that the people that design these things have their maids and their nannies sign contracts saying they won't let their kids use iPads. I think if Prodigy worked, because our kids play it so much, if Prodigy worked, they'd be doing much better at math and our scores would be up. But those are much different than actually doing like work in person. It's getting a different kind of mentality, triggering a dopamine response. And that's not how you learn math. So again, I think it's just a bigger conversation about how we use technology in elementary schools, but I'm completely opposed to students having one-on-one technology at the elementary level. I'd rather have carts that we use that can go around for testing and whatnot. But let's get to writing stuff on drafts. First draft, second draft, not just type one thing on a computer and make some changes. I just feel like there's so much that's taken away from that. Might be just a personal gripe. Don't know if there's agreement with me on that, but that's a conversation I'd like to have in the future. I mean, let's see here. I mean, if this budget doesn't pass, I think we need to have an honest conversation about cutting all funding for athletics and extracurricular activities and having booster groups make up the difference for that. It's awful to say because that's something that really engages kids. It's going to hurt our graduation rate if we cut something like that. I'm not really in favor of putting that into this budget, but if the public doesn't pass, they need to be aware that that's something that we could do. And that's probably something I would push for too. I have no intention of running for re-election to this seat. I have no problem making tough decisions if it means our students and staff members can be safe. I'm just going to be perfectly honest with you guys. I don't want to create a budget that puts people in danger in our schools. And I think that if we make a lot of these cuts, that's what's going to happen. I think our approach should be setting a minimum standard of safety in our schools, both, for students, for staff, mental health wise, whatnot. and then kind of craft a budget based on that. And then if we need to make some hard choices after that, we can make that, but that would be a much more organized process for me. And it is a crisis that we're in. I mean, it's a budgetary crisis as a city. It's been building for, the last 15, almost 20 years now. There's also, a crisis if we make a lot of the cuts we're considering. We're gonna revert to a lot of the issues we have. The behavior issues are gonna pop back up. They're probably gonna be worse than they ever were before. You're gonna have an increase of bullying, student safety concerns. I mean, the staff members in our building are what drive everything, and they are the ones, and like having those bodies, not just like bodies in the room, it does help, but it's the people who know the students and work with them one-on-one. It's devastating. So, I mean, that's really the only direction I can provide here is I think we need to get ourselves more organized. I think we need to, kind of decide what our priorities are and kind of craft our decisions based off of that. We need to do a better job of giving our superintendent direction. Maybe like the Title I committees that are at each school, there is a position spots on them for school committee members and parents. And I think that that's something that we really should consider. Like last year when I checked those lists, there wasn't a single committee at any school that had any school committee members, and the only parents that were involved were district employees. So I think it would be better for our districts and that kind of funding if we did include a school committee member maybe on each school's Title I committee. It's not the official name, but that's something that I very much wanted to see and talked about when I ran for the seat too. And the last thing I want to say, I guess maybe more to Councillor Harriman here, if he could relay the message is like, we really don't have much that we can like at our discretion here. The positions that we're thinking about cutting to me are like, we shouldn't be cutting at all. We're just putting our students and staff in danger. And I can still think of a whole lot of things at the city level that we can cut. Honestly, and I think the city just needs to do a little bit more to help us out here. They have discretionary items that you guys can spend on. And this isn't at you, by the way. I'm hoping you just relate this to the council here. But I mean, I can think of multiple positions that could be cut that aren't necessarily needed, two that could easily be combined. And so, yeah, I guess if there's any message, you guys need to cut more. And it's not to say that it's going to hurt the city. I get that, but like we have mandates that we have to follow, and you guys have some discretionary spending. Like, it was a little frustrating hearing you guys taking requests from nonprofit organizations when we're considering cutting positions that are going to put our kids in danger and our staff members in danger. So I really, really hammer that message home, and I don't know how to end this. I usually never do, so I'm just going to stop talking. But I'm just not in a position to vote on this budget tonight, and I just want to organize ourselves a little bit better and move forward and be able to provide our administration with more of a direction.
Member Hurd.
Thank you. In the beginning of our meetings, Jake, you had talked about a potential of getting interest that the city had previously been collecting that we were hoping to get a hold of. Where are we in that process?
So we've had conversations about it. I've been talking to City Administrator Kamath a fair amount lately about what things we can do. And as of right now, that's still in your revenue sheet as that sits. So as we propose, it remains in here as a revenue for our district.
Okay. Oh, Member Eames.
I think we have some consensus in the room that we don't like these cuts. I think we have some consensus in the room that we want you to look at the administration, central office type jobs to non-student facing jobs to think about bringing different cuts to us. I know you worked very hard, all of you, on finding these cuts, but the nature of these cuts is disturbing and making us all very anxious. So I think just listening to everybody, it's quite astonishing to me how much we're on the same page. And I think it's wonderful that we're on the same page. It still leaves us in a pickle, but we're all on the same page. So that's some progress in a way. The city has got to take up our problem. And so I just, again, add on, we're consensus in this room about that too.
Member Harper.
Thank you. I'm going to say my thing about the reval, which is just that I shared this in an email to yourself and the superintendent today. Yeah, we we are going to be sending a letter, the school committee, to the city council, asking them, basically talking about how we don't have the accurate information in order to make responsible choices about what our budget would look like and how it would impact taxpayers. So that is very important information. And also, I think just say it out loud again, the city has not done a property tax reevaluation since 1988. And the market has shifted a little bit since then. So, and it's also not, property taxpayers, individual folks, it's not their fault that this hasn't happened. It is just a very unfortunate circumstance that we're in, that where we have to have this referendum vote on May 12th, and potentially people will be finding out what their increased valuation rate is, and therefore how much additional they're going to owe as the difference. And that I understand, well, actually, I don't fully understand if it's based on, draft, the superintendent proposed budget, or if it's based on, no changes or what. But this is all really important information. And I think it's going to require us to think very creatively and proactively about community engagement, as far as, taxpayers need information. They need transparency around what's happening. They also need opportunities to ask questions and share their concerns, and to understand what property tax relief resources are available to them. In some of these scenarios, it mentions the homestead exemption, but you have to apply for the homestead exemption. And, there may be people who haven't done that, and you're supposed to apply by today, April 1st, to get it. So this is all, I think I have heard, I don't know what's been said publicly, but I think I have heard from individual council members that there is some support for trying to figure out how we might be able to slow down this process so that it's not all hitting people like within a few months. These increases, it's just not, it doesn't make any sense. Like people need time to financially plan for an increase. And so so I just think that if I am very happy to, participate in, like the town hall that the superintendent mentioned, but maybe even more community engagement sessions, ideally community engagement sessions between now and May 12th. So, I think as much as we can before May 12th, so that there is opportunity for the public to engage with this and to get their questions answered and to share their concerns prior to just showing up at the ballot box. That, that's only going to help all of us, including our kids, who are going to feel the impact if nothing different happens. So that is what I wanted to share.
Okay. Well, I'm going to share a few thoughts, and then I think we should open it up for public comment, and then we can continue the committee discussion. So, yeah, where to start? I'm thinking this through on the fly a little bit. We are going to have to vote on a budget, and I don't think we're going to like it. I think that's the situation that we are in, unfortunately, due to all the stuff that we covered earlier on about the larger cost drivers that are kind of out of our control. So, and I do agree. I think we have been a little loose with direction to the superintendent so far. I think tonight he did offer what we asked for based on what he had shared previously. Now, it doesn't mean we need to accept those or that we're, again, happy about it. I do think before the evening closes, we should try to get a little more specific than we have so far. If we're unhappy with what the superintendent has shared, then I think we need to be more specific in what we want to see instead. And I don't think we've quite gotten there. I think we've shared some themes and concepts, but not really enough, in my opinion, that I would be confident the next time we come back to discuss this, that we'll have the information or even, a particular set of packages that we'd be happy considering. So I'm just not sure we've shared that level of detail yet. Just, in terms of looking at administration specifically, I'm taking that to mean the Article 6, which is the, quote unquote Dingley, I guess you would say, and then Article 7, which is the school level. I think, it's certainly worth looking there. I just want to be careful that whatever we ask of the superintendent to work out with his staff and propose is thinking seriously about, what are we asking for in terms of adjustments for a budget or other kind of operational purpose, and not just that we're out for blood because we're unhappy with having to make cuts at all. And so if we're having to make cuts somewhere, then we want it to be cut at the administration level too. And I say that in part because it's just not a large percentage of our overall budget. And this has come up in different ways, I think, every year, and not just with our process, but any budget process, that it can be hard to grapple with the actual large segments of our budget. And, I'm just not sure, and to the extent that our situation is kind of driven by, we have a large budget already, we're asking for a large increase. It's on top of the revaluation issue affecting taxes. To the extent that we're looking to save taxpayer money, it's just a lean part of the budget to be looking at. And again, it's not to say that we shouldn't, or that they haven't already looked it over, but again, that we shouldn't ask for that. But I'm putting some caution there in terms of how much we can expect and how much is reasonable to ask there, I think, without actually hurting our ability to carry out what the other policies and ultimately goals that we want the district to be able to carry out. So I guess I'll just leave it there, because we are going to come back to more discussion, I think, after public comment. And again, hopefully we can share a little more in terms of what we like the superintendent to come back with. And we'll also talk more about when we will be voting on this and talk about the logistics a little bit. So with that, we're going to open it up for public input, and I'm just going to read the spiel here. So members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on budget items. Speakers must adhere to our public comment policy, BEDH, which is available in the back of the room or on the LPS website. These meetings exist to conduct school committee business. The purpose of public comment is to share thoughts on school and educational matters. Committee members and school staff will not reply during this time. Comments must be directed to the chair and be civil. By law, comments may not pertain to specific staff or students. Comments about individuals must be directed privately to the appropriate LPS staff. Student privacy must be maintained. The public comment period is 30 minutes unless extended due to unusual circumstances. Priority goes to Lewiston residents and parents, students, or employees of LPS. Before starting, please state your name, town or city of residence, and your affiliation to LPS. So would anyone like to give public comment this evening? Okay.
Good evening, school board members. My name is Stephanie Poulin, and I'm a general education social worker at Montello. I want to speak briefly about equity as it relates to this proposed budget. Equity is not about distributing resources evenly across buildings. It is about aligning resources with need. Montello serves some of the highest need students in the district. Data will show you that. Multilingual learners, students experiencing homelessness, and students navigating significant trauma and instability. In that context, student support staff are not an added layer. They are the foundation that allows students to access learning safely. When those supports are reduced, the system doesn't adjust, it breaks. Students don't have fewer needs, they have fewer adults available to meet them. At the same time, we can look at districts like Portland, which serve similar populations and have made significant investments in school-based mental health supports, recognizing that these roles are essential to both safety and academic success. We have 6 currently general education social workers. The Portland Public Schools have approximately 1,000 more students, and they have 38 general education social workers. That is terrifying. That raises an important question for us. If equity is truly the goal, how do we justify a proposal where the highest need schools are facing the greatest reductions in student support? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there another comment?
Hello, my name is Karen Hobson and I live in Lewiston. And I just wanted to say that I know that the city council is working on their budget and that the citizens of Lewiston don't have any say in it other than going to meetings. We can't vote on it. We can't do anything about the county budget. The only place that people in Lewiston can voice their concern with, you know, a potential $6.5 million over the 2025 budget is at the polls. And we don't know what our property tax bills are going to be. We have a lot of elderly and people on single incomes, and I apologize that, you know, I'm one of them and that I no longer have kids in the school system, but I do think we need to have a strong school system. But we can't do it on the backs of everyone. You know, I mean, if my property taxes, according to Mr. Harriman's calculation is correct, I mean, I could be paying $4,000 more on my house, and I'm a single taxpayer, and I'm retired. That's going to be difficult. So to the city council, try to help us. I have had the homestead extension since I was eligible. And luckily, with being at 100% value, I'll get the $25,000 off my tax bill. But I think that the school board should be ready for the budget to get voted down multiple times. It happened in 2024, where it got voted down 3 times. On the 3rd time it passed. And then a week later, we found out that we bought the building at 287 Main Street for $1 million. Well, maybe if that, and I realized that we need it because we were sending kids to out of state facilities, and that's extremely expensive, but the building has sat there and we haven't been able to do anything with it because we're in times like this where we can barely pay for the things in the school budget to educate our kids, and we can't put the money into renovating that building in order to either use it for other classrooms or for, you know, the kids that really need the extra space. So that's all I wanted to say. And thank you guys for having us here. And thank you for your hard work on this budget. I know it's hard.
Thank you very much.
I'm Martin Chartrand. I'm a resident of Lewiston, Ward 3. Listening to I appreciate everybody's efforts toward keeping the essential workers that work with students. I see some of this need directly because I'm a behavioral health professional and I work with students to develop those social emotional skills outside of school. But I know that some kids just need extra support, and when everybody's thrown together in school, those costs are going to be paid in some other way later if they're not paid now through offering the support that kids need to thrive and that teachers need to be able to teach. So I second that we do not need to be cutting, we do not want to be cutting any positions that interact directly with students, especially the social emotional learning and the I guess you called it the deans and the librarians and student engagement. Those types of positions are especially important. And if you can find cuts in administration, by all means, yes, absolutely. And I too hope the city can find other cuts, because schools are the future of our city, really. The future workers that are going to be here, or people navigating their future elected officials, and how we support and supporting them equitably now is going to be more likely that we have an equitable and just future. So it's worth the money. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pam Perry. I am the technology instructional coach at the high school, and because the middle school position has gone unfilled this year, I've started working also at the middle school. I've also been a teacher in this district since a month after I got married, which was in 1991, so I've been here a really long time. And I just wanted to talk about what happens when you go from the 3 remaining technology coaches that we have now to none. As you all were talking, a lot of things came up in my mind that I wanted to address, but I think if I don't just read what I have on this piece of paper, I won't have my thoughts organized, so I'm just gonna read something that I already had sent out earlier. Our students have changed. I mean, I've been here since 1991, so obviously I've seen those changes. And the world is really different now. I mean, when you can get facts with a quick Google now, the way instruction needs to be done needs to change. We can't even predict the world that they're going into or how they'll need to use technology. It's not about teaching specific tools. I don't, as a technology coach, because I'm a teacher first, I don't just say, look at these cool robots that we can bring into the classroom, aren't they cute? I mean, we're being really intentional about the things that we're bringing into the classroom to try to increase student engagement, which is also directly related to student behavior. If student engagement is up, behavioral problems also go down. So it's about helping teachers design learning that builds adaptability, problem solving, and real world skills. A big part of that is helping students show their thinking, not just turning in a final answer. The process matters. How they got there, how they revised, how they made decisions. This is what actually builds learning, and that's what we help teachers design. We're also starting to use tools like Magic School, which also might be in the list of cuts in really intentional ways. This is just an example of one tool that we currently have. For example, with multilingual learners, it can act as a writing partner. It doesn't do the work for them. It asks questions, gives sentence starters, and helps them clarify their thinking so they can improve their own writing. A teacher can't be next to a student one-on-one every moment that they're writing, but this gives students a writing partner that they can work with until the teacher has a chance to come work with them. So this gives students immediate feedback while they're working instead of waiting a week until the teacher grades something and gives it back. And it builds a culture of revision and continuous improvement. This works across all subjects and supports all students. But these tools only make a difference when teachers are supported in how to use them, which is the role of a technology coach.
If you don't mind wrapping up in just a few seconds here.
Pardon me?
If you don't mind wrapping up, just 3 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just that also, we are also constantly going to professional development, seeing what works in other schools, bringing strategies back here. And I think the big part is something that you might not always see in the coaching dashboard when you're looking at cycles and working with teachers is that when we help teachers with a certain strategy or a certain tool, they spread it to the next teacher, which spreads it to the next teacher and to the next teacher. And instead of helping one teacher and 100 students, you've helped 4 teachers and 400 students.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name's Cameron Bigelow. I am a teacher at Next Step in the Longley Building. I'm also the Government Relations Chair for the LEA. And I wanted to get up here just to kind of voice a few things. The first thing is I want to acknowledge the extenuating circumstances that are leading to this budget process. This is going all the way up from federal down to state, to city, into the district. So it's important to recognize that. And I know that you all are stuck in between a rock and a hard place a lot of the time. So, but the big question I had for you guys, and I just wanted to know kind of where you guys are at with this, is whatever we decide to do with the budget, cuts, lots of cuts, not a lot of cuts, no cuts, whatever it happens to be. There is a vested interest in getting that passed the first time. And I think that is a big reason why this is a big conversation is the voters and interpreting what the voters might want to pass versus not pass. And so I just was curious, once we get a budget from you guys that you guys, begrudgingly or unbegrudgingly pass, are you guys going to be willing to help, get out there and really beat feet and knock on doors and get this thing passed the first time? So I just wanted to hear from you guys on that.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment at this time? Okay, so back to the committee. Yes, Member Hurd.
So I was wondering, Mr. Chair, if we kind of going back to what you had said, if we could each go around, maybe starting with Member Jensen, and have more of a clear, concise of what we want to see, what we don't want to see.
Took the words right out of my mouth. I think that's an excellent idea, and I think that's a good place to start. Would you be comfortable starting with that? Okay, Member Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess as far as cuts, I'd like to see more of a look into the central office positions. I hate to say it, but I do think we need to look in that. Even if we're saving $7,000 a year, I'll take it for the one-on-one technology. Those are the really big things that stand out to me. I guess I can't see myself voting for a budget that makes a ton of cuts. I think what I'm going to end up supporting is something that is going to raise taxes, but somewhat reasonably. We're in a crisis and we need to act like it. And if this is what it takes to get the people of Lewiston to really wake up and start demanding more out of our leaders, state and federally, I think that's what it's going to take. So I guess I'm having a tough time because I don't really know what exactly priorities we're going to set up going forward are. But those couple of things really stand out to me as the direction to move forward in.
If I could actually make a suggestion for you and for others, just if you have something in mind, if possible, is there a dollar range you have in mind for your example, looking at Dingley, we can reference, so district admin is about 3.1 million proposed. Is there a dollar range you or other committee members would like the superintendent to come back with?
Not necessarily. I think for me, the approach I would want to take is what's the minimum standard of safety we can have in our schools. I don't think we're going to pass a budget that improves academic outcomes. I think our academics are going to slip the next couple of years if we take the approach that we probably don't have a choice to take. I think the only thing we can really argue at this point is keeping our kids safe. And that's just the honest reality of it. So I guess for me, it's really hoping that the city council cuts as much as they can, and that's going to help us out as much. And the more that they can cut, the more the tax rate can lower. But to me, it's meeting that minimum safety of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Member Bowden, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, so I think for me, I would like to see what it looks like if we cut all of the locally funded coaching positions out of our budget, as well as I'd like to see Superintendent Lane Lewis take a look at if there's anything he can trim at Denley, unfortunately. I hate to say that. I know, like I said, it takes a lot of people to run this district. We're the second largest school district in the state. And we don't have the tax base Portland has. We'll say that as well. But you know, I think around 2 million is a good spot in my mind. I don't know if we can get there. It's
You
tough.
mean, sorry, you mean total?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Clarifying question. Total add or total reduction?
No,
Is-
total reduction. Not a total add.
Member Eames?
Okay, so I think I'm giving up the fight for the locally funded coaches. I think maybe the locally funded coaches, I wouldn't fight for them, I guess, at this crisis point. I don't understand how we have a 40% tax increase and yet we're fighting for our budget. I don't get that. There's a piece of that argument that makes no sense. So please, somebody explain that to me.
So
Okay, maybe it's on the city side, but that makes no sense. So we got to figure that out. We've got to get that sorted out before we do our voting. At this point, it seems the past few years we've been cutting to the bone, and now we're talking about amputation, and I won't go for that. I will go and talk a lot to the public about the fact that our local share is much smaller than the city ask. Our ask is much smaller than the city ask. Our total budget is much bigger, but our local tax ask is much smaller, and that's not clear in most of the stuff that goes out. And I think we need to make that very clear to everybody all the time. And I'm going to be talking about that as much as possible. So yes, I'll be part of that push to get the word out. I'm sure there were more things to say, but that's what I had in mind.
Member Harper, anything to add?
Thanks. So in addition to the sort of data requests that I made earlier, I think that what I would like to see, so one of your scenarios includes, and again, I still feel like I need to understand the mental health resources better for each school, but as far as what I'm hearing, I think, you know, for as far as the ease funded positions, the social work positions, keeping those in high school, middle school, Montello, or no, Montello isn't, that was the local funded one. But seeing what we can do to keep those in, not all 7 necessarily mental health positions. But again, I still want more information. And then I think what I'm hearing a lot is in as far as elementary level goes, that the Montello positions of the dean, the family engagement coordinator, gen ed social worker, and resource room are pretty important. And so if those positions were kept, then we wouldn't need the new addition of the student support specialist at Montello. Connors is also a very high needs school, and we haven't heard as much about directly from people about what the impact is going to be there. But I could potentially see something along those lines happening with Connors as well. I can't say enough about exactly what to do for the other elementary schools. But if we have to make decisions, then I would definitely support in terms of that equity lens, looking at the highest need schools and keeping positions there. I also just wanted to clarify, I mentioned stuff about community engagement. I'm not saying that that is all on the schools. I think that that is actually should be led by the city in large part about information about the revaluation and getting out there. But I think that definitely information about the school budget, more engagement around around that, and having if the city, for example, were to make cuts on their side in the interest of sparing the schools, the voters need to know about that. So just thinking really creatively about community engagement is something that I think we can participate in. And someone asked about knocking on doors to pass the budget. I'm in personally to do what we can, absolutely, for voter turnout, to support the schools, whatever budget comes out of this process. And yeah, I think that's what I'll say for now. And also just wanted to acknowledge, I hope that Jake, you're not taking the superintendent as direct attacks. I have a lot of respect for you and for the challenging nature of this work. And I know it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and I haven't done this before, so I also feel like I'm just like sending all kinds of emails and like trying to get data and answers. And so I know that that's very challenging on top of everything else you're doing day to day. And so I just want to also acknowledge that. And but I think Member Jensen pointed out that the process feels like it's not totally clear about how we approach it, and it feels a little bit messy to me personally, just as going through it. So I just am acknowledging that.
Do you need to jump in, Member Bowden?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing onto mine. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, like I I I don't disagree necessarily with the librarian cuts that you put in there. And I know that's a blow to a lot of people. I know a lot of people really want to keep our middle school and our high school librarians. But just a sign of the times, we give every single kid an iPad and they can look anything up that they want to. Kids aren't going, as far as I know, like my own kids don't go to the library and look up things in encyclopedias anymore, and they don't even know what the Dewey Decimal System is, honestly. So, and I had shared this with you that, up until the budget talks started about potentially removing the librarians, my senior at Lewiston High School had never even been to the library with her class, but then was taken to the library with her class. And so I'm just saying, like, if we have to make these cuts, that is a piece of it that I am comfortable cutting. So if you want to add that on to the 2 mil I'm asking for, that would be helpful.
Okay, Member Harper, you had to.
Sorry, I mean, what Member Bonin shared, actually, Kate brought up for me. I meant to mention, I would like to see the librarian stay personally. I think that there's been a lot of data shared with us about the impact that that librarians have, particularly on low-income communities and their literacy rates. So I just, yeah, we can have two different scenarios. Thank you.
All right, Member Hurd.
Thank you. So one thing I definitely don't want to see cut, don't you dare cut sports or extracurricular activities. Don't even think about that. Also, and I have already shared this, as a district, we are required by law to, for special ed and multilingual, because that's a very big population of our district, but behavior is also has a very big impact in our district. And just because it's not required by law doesn't mean that it's not something that we should fully be behind and be funding. And so I don't want to see any position that in any way, shape, or form is going to, I don't want to see those positions cut. And so we talk a lot about our lanes and where we are for school committee. Talk about like what your job is, what our job is. And so I don't really have positions per se that I would want to see cut because I don't feel like that's my lane. I don't know all the positions in our district. I don't know how the district is managed. Like, that's your job. And so and I know that's awful. It's kind of awful to say, and I'm not putting this back on you, but it's a hard question for you to ask of a school committee member that doesn't understand the day-to-day operations of what goes on in our schools. And so I don't have a position or positions for you. I just know that I cannot support and I will not support a budget that cuts positions that directly relate to behaviors in our district or extracurriculars or sports. And so whatever that looks like, that's my 2 cents.
Member Glenn?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the general fund. I think we have to use some more of that. I think we need to look at that a little harder. And, I think, I don't know what is non-negotiable. I don't know what has to be left off the table. I think if we're going to save the face-to-face interactions and the well-being and the safety of our students, we have to look at other things. So we have to look at art. We have to look at music. We have to look at athletics. We have to look at extracurricular, and we have to look at librarians. I don't know, if we're going to make, like I said, the mental health and the well-being non-negotiable, we have to look at all these other things as well. Thank you.
Counselor Harriman?
So I'm still I would like to keep all the filled positions that we have, both for, for the staff who are in them and also because just looking at the list, I can't really find any that seem like they could be cut. Looking at the list of vacant positions, I'd like to see the teachers and coaches on that list stay in the budget. I know that only leaves, I think, maybe 3 positions there that are not teachers or coaches. If it is feasible to reduce those, that would be the special ed assistant principal at Connors, the duty aide at Connors, and the district clinical supervisor. If it is feasible to reduce those without other negative impacts, I think that's maybe a place to start. I do want to say again, like I said before, I think we need to balance what we're looking at cutting right now in order to leave ourselves room in case the budget does get voted down. I also wanted to speak to some of the other comments. So the tax increase, the reason why many homeowners will see a tax increase, even though the city is not bringing in more tax revenue due to this revaluation, is just because the values in different properties and different types of properties has shifted since 1988. So some people will see an increase. Some property taxpayers, probably most likely commercial taxpayers, will see a decrease because we're not going to be bringing in more revenue. I hesitate to say that everybody will see an increase because I think some homes are currently closer to their market value than others. I'm just thinking of myself, for example. Mine's a 3-unit, so I don't know if that makes it different, but it's valued at 95,000 right now. It's worth 3 times that at least. So I'm in the position where I will definitely be paying much more taxes. There is an attempt by some of us on the council to find out about and to push for, if it's feasible, phasing this in. I know other communities like Brunswick, for example, did a revaluation and then they paused it. I don't know. I'm not proposing that, but I know that maybe there is some flexibility that we have there as far as because it really is not sustainable to hit someone with a multi-$1,000 tax increase in 1 year. if it has to happen, it has to happen, but people need time to plan. Also, some of us are looking at cuts to the city budget. I am not opposed to that. And I agree that it's important to message that to voters, because even if we cut things from the city budget in order to reduce the overall tax impact, the school budget number will stay the same potentially if we cut these. So people don't necessarily realize that the two are tied together in some ways, because we vote on the school budget but not the city budget. And then finally, I would just invite all the committee members to come to the workshop next Tuesday. Superintendent will be presenting this to the city council. It's at 6 p.m. at City Hall. And yeah, it would be great to see people there. Well, thank you.
Yes, Member Hood.
Thank you. I also just wanted to add to that, while I don't want to see any of the behavior positions cut, we also have to keep in mind that a lot of the teachers that actually live in Lewiston who fund most of their classrooms from their paycheck are then going to be hit with a tax increase, but then be continued to expect to fully fund their classrooms. And how do we ask those teachers in our district to do that? They can't. And so I don't know what the answer is. And I know it puts you in a hard position. But we also need to be mindful. Again, we had members of the public come up and talk tonight about how they don't know how they're going to afford their increase in taxes. And like it was stated, they can't change that. They have to pay that anyway. The only thing they do have control over is at referendum. And so I would feel more comfortable not kind of along the lines of what Member Harriman said, is not going the deepest we can go, and maybe giving ourselves a little wiggle room if there's potential that it doesn't pass at referendum.
Okay, so I'll share a few thoughts. One, just on that point, I maybe have a slightly different philosophical view on that, which is I am going to vote on a budget that I think is the most responsible budget right then and there. And I don't know if I necessarily like the idea of trying to game out a little bit, like, well, if we add a little more, and because it's going to get voted down, it is possible and that it will be voted down, obviously. I don't want to try to bet on the likelihood exactly. But what I want to do is vote on something that I think is both a responsible budget and can be passed immediately in the first vote. That I think is possible for that to happen, at least. Maybe it's not the most likely thing this year. I know it's difficult, but that's at least how I'm coming at it. And I think I mentioned before, I knocked on many doors last year, and the budget just barely passed, and that was with a 3% increase on the school budget local ask. And now, as is, it's a 12% increase, and it passed by 14 votes last time. So me and everyone else is going to be needing to knock on many more doors to try to get it passed at any number of referendums. So I understand it's a very challenging situation, but at least that's my view, is to try to get the best budget we can sort it out right now. I'll share first, I guess, just in terms of where I'm at, and in terms of if I did have to vote on something right now. Obviously we're not voting tonight, but if I did, what it would be, and then a little bit about maybe information for future meetings to discuss. I think my preference would be to, starting from the baseline of the superintendent's proposed budget, which includes those various cuts, I would keep the librarian just system positions as it is. But I would not go through with any of the restructuring of the student support positions. And one reason for that is that this is bringing up a whole other topic, but I think sooner rather than later, this school committee is going to need to look at redistricting the elementary schools. And that ties into many other conversations about, the middle school approach, the child development services, the, 287 Main Street building. It's tough to, it's going to be a long series of things we need to sort through. But the reason I mention that is, those student support positions are somewhat set up to deal with the elementary schools as they are currently. And knowing that at some point we're going to need to look at if the makeup, the student makeup of those schools is going to need to change, then that might be, in my mind, the more appropriate time to change the structure of the student support positions. So that's my thought there. I think in terms of what the superintendent shared tonight, that's somewhere close to is maybe option D or something like that. But I think that it included some new positions. You don't need to bring it up. We're not going to be at that. We don't need that level of detail right at this moment. But that's where I'm at. Unfortunately, I would still carry out the other reductions as proposed, and it's not great. I'm not super pleased with that, but I think we need to try to grapple with the fact that because of the other cost drivers, in particular, again, I've talked about this a number of times, we all have, about the special education requirements are really just, we have to push so much more money in that direction that it is tying our hands with some of these other areas of service that we try to offer students at large. And but our hands are kind of tied in that respect. In terms of, what I might suggest for next time. So, and we'll also talk about what next time will be and when. But, I think Member Hurd was saying, and this is always a tension, right? In that we don't know every position in the district. We don't know how every position is functioning, how well it's functioning, et cetera. And so that we always have to strike this balance of what is the direction that we're giving the superintendent to then come back to us that we then have to decide on. And it can create this kind of chaotic feeling where we do have strong opinions about these positions, very strong opinions. And yet I don't really have the capacity to go through all 1,000+ positions and be like, well, trade in this one for that one for this one. So that is why I kind of indicated, one way we can approach it is to say, I think this is the dollar amount that we need to try to hit, whether it's within a particular article or for the budget as a whole. Again, just we didn't really go in that direction, and because where I'm at currently, it works well enough with the positions proposed. I'm not necessarily asking the superintendent to change the dollar amount ask. But, that is a tension that we just kind of have to work through a little bit. So I think there's been enough requests, and I'm interested to see as well, in this case, are there any areas, whether it's positions or other things to trim back under Article 6, the central office administration? I think that's worth exploring. Again, because it's, that article is about $3 million. It's not a huge dollar amount to try to dig out of that one, in my opinion. But I'm curious to see if the superintendent has ideas for that next time. What I'd also suggest, just in terms of format, is I think what we're going to need is we need information in a way that we can make a motion to then discuss and move things in or out of and then vote on it. And I think what has worked relatively well in the past is just having, and the superintendent has provided this in slightly different forms, so just having, option A, here's the list of each position under option A that would be, in this case, added, probably based on how our conversation have gone, added back in from what the superintendent's original proposed budget was. Although maybe there will be something to also take out from Article 6. And just say, okay, option A is these, option B, is a request to, okay, put back in the librarians, not do the support changes. So that, at least for me, and I'm curious if others agree with this, in previous years, I found that to be the most helpful, to actually construct a motion that everyone knows what they're voting on. Because I don't think any one of the 8 of us here tonight have said exactly the same thing. And yet, at least 5 of us are going to need to vote on a budget and pretty soon. And so if others have other ideas for how best to present the information or get the information to vote on, please do share that. But I think that might be what we need to make that happen. I would ask the superintendent, do you have any comments or any questions for the committee at this point? We have put a lot on your plate.
Tons. No, I appreciate having the opportunity to go back and work with our team to get input on different things, and we'll continue to provide more data as requested. I do worry about dismantling something that is unrecoverable. I'll say that up front, but I'm also mindful of the budget and the limited resources that all schools are facing for challenges. So I would say, even if it's offline tonight, tomorrow, whatever, if you have thoughts on specific roles, some of you have shared that along the way, and I've continued to gather those, bless you. But when we say things like Dingley, well, there's only so many people there, and to Member McLaughlin's point, we'll keep looking, and I'm not saying we can't find something. I just think that we do get to a point where we're trading one thing for another. Yeah, I got a lot on my mind, obviously, and more work to do. So I'll get to task. I will say though, to the point that we say things like chaos or what have you, it can feel like chaos because it's a massive, complex thing. What we've tried to do is break it down as simply as possible while answering lots of questions. So I hope people know that what we're trying to do is take your thoughts and bring it back in a way that is digestible. And again, I'm always happy to answer as many questions as I can in a 24-hour period. But I do want to be mindful that it's early April. Typically, school committees do things like a parking lot and approve a budget towards mid-late April. And so it should feel a little chaotic right now because we're talking about cutting 30 people or 30 positions potentially. And so that creates chaos. That in itself, the flurry of emails that you get, the flurry of emails I get, it's a lot. It's a lot to take on. So we'll look at what other reductions we can make. If you think of something else, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll consider all that we can. But I trust our leadership team. I think sometimes it feels like somebody else might throw you different data or a different thought on a position. And I'm not saying that things are inaccurate, but I do trust our team greatly. And so I appreciate you all being here, those of you who can make it tonight. But there's a lot of people who put a lot of thought into this, going back some of us years. So I just needed you to hear that, know that what we're bringing forward to you is as transparent as we know how and as uncomplex as possible. Because schools have, 10 different funding sources, and we could talk about pulling things out like coaches, but when we bring that back to you, you realize how few coaches there are in our local budget. But it does dismantle a support staff for staff that, when I think about going back 7, 8 years ago, the constant concern that we heard from the Association for Teachers was, how will we support our teachers in doing this work? What professional development will be provided? That's how this structure got off the ground, was to do exactly what our teachers said they needed. And so if we dismantle that, we've in effect dismantled it. And we talk about long-term effects. If the core philosophy is to improve instruction to the best of our ability, to get as many kids as possible to a certain place, good instruction matters. And so if we're talking about more teachers or a different structure for teachers or having coaches to support that effort, I think it's important. But I will say there's a critical mass that you get to as well. I was hesitant to put the instructional coaches on here, but I knew there'd be members that would want them because of the cut them I've heard over and over again year after year, and knew that we had a $6.5 million problem. But I do think we get to a point of critical mass. If we don't have the specialists that help develop the coaches, and we don't have enough coaches to actually be in the schools, we've dismantled it. And so we can't then, to Member Jensen's point, say later, like, where's the academic progress? Well, we just took away all the teacher supports. We took away instructional supports for implementation of curriculum and expertise to help with kids and strategies. So is mental health important? Sure. But if you don't get good instruction all day, but you have access to a clinician, what are we trading? And it's a tough question, but I guess that's what we have to talk about, and I'll bring back to you some options. I think clinical supports are incredibly important. When we talk about education, tier 1 direct instruction is the most powerful thing a school can do.
Okay. Yeah, so I do think there are a couple of categories of things I might say. One is, yes, I do think there's a bit of a parking lot for, I guess I would say, some substantive discussions in terms of, okay, do we want to be making further cuts to coaches, but as well, and that does kind of mix together with, okay, finally, what is the budget package that we're putting forward? And I do want to, just to be clear, and I apologize to the committee if it has felt this way, but, I was trying to be clear that there's an option to vote on a budget tonight, but it's certainly not required. And I don't want it to feel like it's been too rushed or there's pressure to just kind of move forward without full information. I just want to be clear that, we have the option, we are going to need to vote, and we only have so many meetings to do so. But yes, I do agree. This does tend to be the time of the year where it feels a little bit overwhelming. And I think that, that is all the more so because this year we're not just talking about cutting vacant positions, we're actually talking about some filled positions as well. And I think that changes the tenor along with everything else. So let me just ask this before we talk about plans for next meeting and next budget conversation. So are there other, let's say, parking lot items that were not mentioned that people want to get in there now? Yes, Member Hurd.
Thank you. So I know, Jake, you had talked about like dismantling of something. So if that is a concern, I know there's other districts that are neighboring that share some coaching, like not each school has their own. And so I know we're talking about taking away the ones that are in the general local ask. But I think like that type of thinking of like, instead of dismantling a whole, are there ways that we can share?
Okay. Yeah, Member Bowden.
Can I add to that? Maybe not necessarily, well, maybe share. I've never heard of that, but perhaps like finding a way to take the ones that we have in title funds, and possibly, what's the word for it? Not sharing them, but go ahead.
So my understanding in Auburn is that, let's say for a literacy coach, each elementary school gets like a quarter or you know what I mean? So for a certain amount of weeks, they would go to this elementary school, and for another weeks, they would go to this elementary school, and for another sort of week, you know what I mean? So not sharing, but sharing, I guess. I don't know if sharing is the best word.
So, yeah, sorry. Is it okay if I
I
speak?
was just yes, but let me just suggest that parking lot item is coach approach, we don't need to get fully into it now, but is there anything you'd like to add now?
I was just gonna say the proposal with the coaches, the literacy and math coaches at the high school, that is the plan. So the plan is to split the literacy coach and the math coach between the middle school and the high school. So the middle school currently funds their coaches with Title I funds because they receive Title I funds. And the high school currently funds those positions with local funds. So the majority of our coaches that are in local are either going to be your SEL coaches, they're going to be your high school literacy and math coach, and they are the multilingual coaches. So the elementary schools, as it relates to literacy and math, are all funded with Title I, except for the multilingual coaches. And so we can share the coaches between the elementary schools, but we can't share, unless we use local funds at the high school, they will not have a coach. So that's why the idea was to split the literacy and math coach, to use some title funds and to use some local funds, with the reduction of an ML coach at the high school. And that would be shared as well. We'd have an ML coach at the middle school and the high school to share as well. So that's, when he said we already do, that was part of the plan, because there are so few coaches, instructional coaches in the local budget. And with Auburn, their funding for Title I is very different than ours because of their population. So they take slices of their Title I funds to be able to provide coaching. So yeah, and we can talk, I'm happy to talk more about that.
Yes.
Then to have coaches as like a parking lot item doesn't really even make sense because most of the coaches are in title funds anyway.
So we'll at least address the superintendent did previously share the list of coaches and how they're funded, and I think we can return to that if nothing else. Okay. Okay, so any other comments on that before we talk about future meetings? Okay, so I'm going to risk trying to figure out logistics on the fly here a little bit. So we do have a meeting scheduled for Monday. Tomorrow is Thursday, which would be when packet for Monday is created. I'm curious what committee members or the superintendent thinks about adding a meeting the week of April 13th to pick up the budget conversation. So it'll be after the city council the presentation to the city council will be after we get the final insurance number, and it gives a little more time for the superintendent putting together some of these items, and it's before April vacation, so we're not running into that quite yet. So first, I guess I should look to my left. Is that logistically possible?
It's definitely logistically possible. I do think it makes more sense because you'll be hotly debating things that you may not have to, depending on different funding we should know by then about the potential bridge one-time supplemental. Should have a good idea by then, and we will definitely know our insurance rate at that time. And so that might create a different atmosphere to discuss potential changes.
Counselor Herman, you had a hand up?
I was just going to check again on the date. Superintendent Langlis, I think you said the 10th or so is when you think you'll find out about the insurance?
He's just double checking.
No, yes, the answer is yes to that. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Is it Member Eames?
Is that a cancellation of the 6th and a moving to the 13th? No, it's a doubling. It's an adding. Okay, thank you.
So what I'm suggesting is we probably wouldn't go into further budget conversations on Monday because I think we're asking the superintendent to put together more information than he can in the next 24 hours. Yes, Member Bowden and then Member.
Do we need the meeting on Monday then?
We have discussed some.
Right, well, we just had a regular meeting on Monday.
We've
This
discussed.
Monday.
We've discussed some other items, including the goals conversation, which frankly is a little difficult, I think, emotionally to have in the middle of the budget conversation, but I think it's better than not doing it. So that's one. We also had discussed a couple other items. I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, we have a few. I think it could be it doesn't need to be a late meeting. I hate to say it out loud, Karen's probably going to knock on wood. But yeah, I think a little more progress on goals is helpful, and we do have some other business items. But I do think if the committee's will is to hold off, that's not unmanageable.
Member Harper, you had a hand.
Thanks. I was wondering also about just using the 6th, if there are items like just sort of workshop data type stuff that we've asked for tonight, if that could be incorporated into Monday. Not, wouldn't expect you to put it all in the packet that goes out, but just like, whenever it's ready, it could be added. That would be my preference, just to make a little bit more progress, rather than try to put it all into one meeting or two meetings, like the 13th and the 27th. And then I was also curious if is the finance committee going to be meeting prior to the 27th? And if so, would that be another opportunity to know? Oh, the next month. Okay. Okay. Well, I was just, yeah, trying to see if there was more opportunity for more discussion.
I just want to touch base on that real quick. The finance subcommittee would not be making budget-related decisions. It's more of a review process and some updates. Not that they couldn't examine finances over time, but at this moment, this is very much a school committee body's decision. That wouldn't be a recommendation out of a subcommittee, I wouldn't think, but.
Yeah, that's right. Did you have a hand up? Oh, sorry. You did first.
So I just want to clarify. So we're going to have a regular meeting on Monday. Then you're presenting to city council on Tuesday, and then you want to have another meeting on Monday, the 13th. Would it make more sense to move the 6th to the 8th, or do we need to meet the night before you go to city council? I'm just feeling burnt out on Mondays, guys. I'm being honest with you. Like this, I mean, I know we do this every year. I do this every year. I get it, but I'm just feeling burnt out with Monday nights. So I would prefer to meet on the 8th if we could, but if not, then I understand.
Counselor Harriman?
Yeah, I just wanted to pitch moving the meeting on the 6th till the next week, as a way to reduce how many meetings we have to go to, if that is feasible. I know there may be business items. I would defer to administration on that. But it seems like we're going to have to meet that week of the 13th anyway. And if the meeting coming up this Monday, the 6th, doesn't have to happen, then maybe it could be pushed to the next week. But I'm okay with both.
Member Jensen?
Yeah, real quick, I can absolutely be amenable. We can postpone the goals conversation. I imagine it mostly being about things that won't really like cost a lot of money. And I think there's a lot of, low hanging fruit that we can do that isn't going to come with a price tag. And so that's going to be like the focus of my conversation. So as far as like what I'm hearing here, I'm totally okay with postponing that goals conversation till a future meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'd just say there's a few, a couple of the larger potentially in terms of time items were, yes, the goals conversation, as well as getting more into the 287 Main Street building. Now that it doesn't necessarily need to happen before further budget conversations, so that could be pushed to later in April. I start to get nervous about keep on pushing things out, but I think I think it would be reasonable to just postpone the April 6th meeting to April 13th or April 15th. Just because we don't have a member here, I'd like to check with everyone before we schedule something, but I think that's a reasonable plan at this point. Okay, so any comments on that?
No, I just would say we need to know by tomorrow, because we have to share a notice to the community that date scheduled. So if we're going to postpone or reschedule, it's not a problem. But if you decided tonight, I could just make sure it goes out.
Yeah, no,
tomorrow.
we'll do it. It's just whether the date will be exactly the 13th or the 15th. I just want to check with all the members before we decide the actual date. But yes, as of now, we'll postpone the April 6th meeting to the following week, and we'll deal with the budget then. We'll follow up with the scheduling exactly after this meeting. Okay, did you have a hand? Okay, any final comments before we adjourn? Okay, is there a motion?
Yes, I would like to I can't talk tonight. I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved by member Hurd, seconded by member Bowden. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, it is unanimous. Have a good evening.